Hello, I am testing this. Let's see if this actually functions. Hello, I am testing this. Let's see if this actually functions. It does work. So the goal today is to show how you can debug a post-start hook failure on zero jupyterhub installations. But really the skill to learn here is how can you look at Kubernetes pod logs when like all you have is access to the AWS account. Now not everyone who has access to the AWS account will be able to have access to the Kubernetes cluster, but this assumes you do have access to the Kubernetes cluster as well. So what I have done is fake in our I'm gonna kill this server so you can more clearly see. This is all ancillary. You can ignore all of this stuff. Yeah, I should have done this before starting the stream, but anyway, it's done. So what I've done is I have intentionally set up a post start hook that will fail. Like this false will cause it to fail. And what is a post start hook? Well, it is something you can set in your jupyterhub configuration that means that you can run any arbitrary command after the user server has started. Now this sounds great, but it is actually fucking terrible, and I recommend that nobody ever do this, because if this command fails, it means that the user server will not start, and then the user has no idea what the fuck's going on. So that's a problem. So I actually recommend that this get put instead in the image and then be made more resilient in that if the command, because if this command fails, then the user server will not start, but you are able to do this in such a way that if the command fails, the user server will still be able to start, because whatever you're trying to do fails, the user server will still be able to start because the command is not exiting with the non-zero exit code. But anyway, so the ultimate solution to post start hooks failing is don't use them. But that's not always under our control. So let's go and see how we shall go about debugging them. So I'm gonna show you that this one is in fact going to fail. It says C fail post start hook. And now this is just gonna sit here until until everything just until the timeout, which is like 10 minutes or something. And this is why I had to kill it manually earlier, because I don't want to wait 10 minutes. So I'm in the AWS console. So this is you have access to this, and I'm going to use AWS Cloud Shell. If you have all the AWS things set up on your local machine, you don't really need to do this. You can just run this on the terminal on your computer, and you don't need to you don't need to do any of this stuff. Why is there a warning in my... I don't know why there's a warning. Anyway, I hope this is actually being recorded. If not, I would be kind of mad. But anyway, so this is a terminal where you're already authenticated to AWS, which you can test. I'm going to increase the font size here, if it will allow me. Okay. AWS STS get caller identity should tell you who you are, which is a bunch of garbage, but I can see my username at the very end, so I know this is who I am. So first we're gonna see what Kubernetes clusters we have running, which is AWS EKS, I think list clusters. Yes, so we can see that there is a cluster running, and then now I can get access to it with update kubeconfig --name equals 2i2c-aws, which then gives me access to this cluster. And I can verify that I do have access by doing kubectl get namespace. Now, for a lot of people, it may fail at this stage because AWS's way of giving you access to Kubernetes is sometimes slightly weird, and you may not have been given access to the Kubernetes cluster, even though you have access to the AWS cluster. So in that case, you should go talk to whoever is set up the cluster and ask them to give you access to the Kubernetes cluster. The keywords you may use is add an AWS EKS access entry for me. So you can actually get kubectl access to the cluster so you can debug failures yourself. But anyway, in this case, it works. So I can see all the namespaces, and of course we run multiple hubs in this cluster, but in this case the hub I have screwed up is called staging. So I am going to say kubectl -- namespace equals to staging, get pod, so I can see all the pods in there, and then you can see my PostStartHook error for my user pod, and from here, I'm going to say kubectl namespace equals to staging, logs, and then this. Right. And then you can see all of the logs that have come here. And this is using one of the Jupyter Docker stacks, and that does provide this kind of information. But you'll see that, if I go back to the config I set, in this I have said echo I'm going to fail and false, and you don't actually see the command, right? So you can't actually tell what's failing. Now, often, things that do fail will provide output here, especially if they're more complex than this. But in this case, it's not more complex, so it's not providing more output there. So what we can do is we can just get a look at the entire contents of the pod, and then we can see what that is. So I'm gonna, kubectl is always like kubectl, and then if there is a namespace, you specify that. And then there's a verb, and then there's a noun. So in this case, the verb is get, and then the noun, when we just said pod, it gave us everything. But now we want details of just this one pod, right? So the noun is now pod, Jupyter, UV Panda. And then it gives me this information, which is not as helpful, right? But then I can set -o, which is output format, to YAML. And then this gives me a whole lot of information. And I know this can be overwhelming, so you're not expected to understand everything. Nobody does, and nobody should. I think if you do understand every single piece of this, I don't know, let me not go down that pathway. But the useful thing to know here is that you can now look at the entire config of this pod, and part of that config is actually the command used as the lifecycle command. So as I scroll up, I'm gonna see a thing named like containers. Don't worry about the API token, that's gonna be invalid pretty soon by the time you see it. But if I go here, I see containers. And I see a bunch of environment variables, and I see lifecycle, post start, exec, command. So you know what command is running, and this will help you understand and see what is going wrong. And then you can either do two things. One is like change the image you're trying to start, so that this command will succeed. Usually it's like kind of obvious why something is failing if you look at the command, or B, like go talk to the people who manage your Jupyter Hub and be like, hey, please change this config so it doesn't do this. And that is it. All right, thank you, bye.